So we have Ken here today with us. He is the principal PM on the Power Platform team at Microsoft, focused on helping organizations transform their business by strengthening digital culture and capability. He has held a variety of roles in product management, infrastructure development, helping organizations to extract value from their digital investment and realizing full ROI by driving adoption, supporting the platform, and educating the stakeholders in the process about all these new digital tools. He's going to be giving us an overview of the Power Platform landing zone architecture. If that's a new terminology for you, it's the landing zone reference architecture provides a prescriptive guidance coupled with Power Platform best practices for organizations, regardless of industry and business application scenarios. And it follows 5 design principles across 8 critical design areas for organizations to define their target state for their tenant. And so Ken is going to give us an overview of those design principles, areas, best practices, and recommendations, and things that you would want to be keeping in mind when you go through this journey, and also make sure that you're aligned with the overall roadmap for the Microsoft Power Platform. And he also shows a demo of the landing zones as well. All yours, Ken.
Thank you. You do such a wonderful job of introducing. Like, I need to record that and repeat all of that every time I introduce myself.
Yeah, all rights, no rights reserved, all yours.
Thank you, Geeta. So happy to be here. I've been really looking forward to this, honestly. As Geeta said, my name's Ken. My full name is Kenrick, actually, and I am relatively new to Microsoft, not new to the platform at all. In fact, I mean, I've been around Power Platform since 2017, maybe a little bit before that, since it was still kind of in beta. I am a program manager here at Microsoft. I'm in what's called DAX, so Development and Admin Experiences, which means I cover governance, compliance, security, adoption, application development, a number of different things. I generally am sort of all over inside of the platform, if you will. I'm originally from a town in Louisiana called Lafayette, known for really great food. If you're ever driving through an I-10 around there, stop, go to a place called Old Time Grocery. It's been open since 1932. Probably the best po' boy you've ever had. And in 2005, I was in this really horrific motorcycle accident, which, you know, I still love motorcycles and cars and all those things today, but I actually broke. It's just a interesting kin fact. I actually broke my neck, my pelvis, my left arm, left hand, and a number of other things. But I'm up and walking, and so grateful and thankful to be here today. With that said, let's jump straight into our agenda here. And I'm going to turn off my camera just to save a little bit of bandwidth, just to make sure that everyone can hear me and whatnot. Okay. So today we will be discussing landing zones, as Geeta so eloquently described. And we're going to go over the key challenges. We're going to talk about, just give you an overview, talk about the design principles, dive into the critical design areas, and we even have a demo today. All right. So jumping straight ahead, I'm going to give you the Ken spill, if you will. In today's world of digital transformation and innovation, ease of use along with rapid time to market is an essential part of doing business for the platform. One of the challenges that we have within Power Platform today is that while moving to the cloud, many organizations are still replicating on-premise concepts and thinking of things still in legacy ways of doing things. These mindsets and sort of adoption principles can be the result of the complexity of the architectures, or simply not understanding the cloud or understanding Power Platform, right? Or maybe how to transfer the knowledge from your on-prem into this new digital age, right? Again, transforming those concepts into something that can be used within Power Platform. So let's say you've done all that and you've passed those initial challenges. Then what usually comes into play is security, governance, compliance. Those things often become blockers or an afterthought. And many times customers just simply want us being Microsoft, to explain, tell them what to do. And one customer put it very plainly to me, hey, Microsoft, just tell me what to do. I just want prescriptive guidance. I just want something easy. Give me a template or something along those lines. So this is what we try to accomplish with, or trying to accomplish with landing zones, I should say. So first and foremost, Power Platform Landing Zones is an architecture and design methodology that consists of design principles and design recommendations across critical technical domains for the Power Platform. The recommendations are proven, prescriptive, and based on not only Microsoft best practices for Power Platform as a whole, but also feedback and things that we know from real-world examples and real-world customers. The next thing we decided to do is, instead of just providing the documentation and the guidance, if you will, we wanted to also provide a way for customers to get up and running quickly. So the next thing we decided to do was give a reference implementation that could help organizations accelerate their journey and implement best practices within their tenant using a curated development experience that spans both Azure and Power Platform. So not simply looking at Power Platform, but looking at the entire M365 stack as a whole, along with other components such as Azure, if we could. Right? So before we dive into the architecture and methodology and implementation, let's have a look at the overall architecture. And by all means, if there's any questions as I'm going forward, please feel free to stop me at any time. So this diagram that you're looking at here depicts a very high-level overall composition of the landing zones, where the landing zone itself is essentially the environment. So think of it as providing all of the necessary plumbing, electricity, water, and everything that you need infrastructure-wise to build and run a city, be it small, large, New York, or my small town of Lafayette, where I'm originally from, right? All of those things are needed as a basis and a building blocks for a successful city to run. The landing zone is much the same, right? It provides a governed, secure, and compliant environment that allows citizen developers or professional developers to have full autonomy to innovate and create business applications. If we go through and we zoom in a little further, right? As I mentioned previously, we didn't just simply look at incorporating Power Platform or starting there, right? We looked at the entire stack. So everything from Azure AD, conditional access policies, security, and all of these other synergies that we had across the entire ecosystem, we took that knowledge and chose to integrate it as seamlessly as we could, right, into the Power Platform ecosystem itself. So what does this look like? So together with all of the different things, right, all the different things being Azure, M365, Power Platform, security, and whatnot within the stack, right? All of these things come together so that our customers can have a turnkey solution with documentation, a sample and deployable reference architecture with a deployable architecture that customers can use as an example, right, within their production or even within their test tenants if they chose to do either one of those, right? And have a repeatable process which allows them to implement things at scale. Now, let's talk a little bit about the architecture and design methodology and our thinking there and how we actually came about all of this. So let's take a closer look at the design principles. Going in a little bit further, the design principles that we have inside of here were, or I should say, serve as a compass for subsequent design decisions across the platform. We have things like environment democratization, policy-driven governance, single control plane management, and so on and so forth. Now, let's start with the environments. So as I mentioned earlier, the environments encompass the landing zones. The landing zones start there. So environments are used as a unit of measurement, scale, and security. They provide the policy boundary. They align to business needs and priorities. So for example, you could assign an environment to a specific department or a specific business unit within your organization. This would allow you to support the business units and the developers to accelerate their digital transformation. On the policy side of things, that's where DLP comes into place. So data loss prevention policies are used to provide guardrails and ensure and continue compliance for the customer so that they can allow their developers in any shape or form, right, citizen, developer, fusion teams, to continue to innovate securely and not worry that they're sort of growing beyond their means, if you will. The single control management plane, that's best defined as the Power Platform doesn't use any abstract layers such as custom development portals or tooling. We use what's within the platform itself, and you do not have to learn to use a brand new tool. One of the other things that we wanted to do was ensure that landing zones were persona agnostic, meaning that they were not designed for a specific use case of a developer. Anyone should be able to use these particular landing zones. It all depends on the admin and what the use case is. Citizen, as I mentioned, professional, fusion teams, you name it. Lastly, Power Platform landing zones, the way that we approached it is we wanted to ensure that whatever native services and capabilities were used whenever possible. So the underlying infrastructure and architecture and design of everything that you see uses existing APIs that almost anyone can connect to today, right? We simply sort of built it for you. Next, so let's talk a little bit about the design principles. All right, as I mentioned, we're going across the entire platform. So together, with the initial design principles, we looked at critical design areas that were common across many questions with our customers, many successful implementations, problem areas. Nothing was off of the table when we looked at this, right? So going into this, let's take identity and access management, for example. And Geeta, I'm happy to come back and do a deeper dive on any one of these subjects, but I'm going to focus on identity and access management for today. So let's take, for example, again, like I said, identity and access. We heard that it was really hard for customers to manage Power Platform through identity or through conditional access and things. So we have made investments that now allow customers to assign individual conditional access policies, using that as an example, to Canvas applications instead of being able to apply the policy as a whole across the entirety of Power Platform. So you now can apply granular control on individual applications at the identity layer to control access to those applications for not only your users, but also guest users to your tenants. We looked at things in terms of also licensing, usage and analytics, and VNet connectivity, you name it. So each of the design areas listed, right, we review the considerations and recommendations and use them to structure and drive the design, right, of the entirety of the landing zones themselves. The policies that you see here are based off of our own MSIT internal policies today. Now, what many folks may not realize is that the MSIT organization within Microsoft is a completely separate unit, if you will. Right? They are our customers. So just as a start naming random organizations, Walmart, Home Depot, the government, you name it, just as they are often our customers, so is MSIT. So a lot of the things that you actually see and hear today, such as, like, for example, the COE toolkit, MSIT uses those tools. So one of the consistent themes that we hear from our customers is that we do not, Microsoft as a whole, provide enough telemetry out to the tenants for admins. A frequent complaint is that 28 days, which is our normal, is not enough, and they want more logs, more visibility. One of the things the landing zones are trying to address is that by using Azure Sentinel, log analytics, and we also now have the capability within product itself to export the data within your tenant to an Azure data lake. I'm happy to answer any questions or anything like that. I thought what we do now is maybe dive a little bit into, just as a quick note, but one of the things I wanted to show you was this. So although it still has the old name of what we used to call it when we were calling it North Star internally, this is now called landing zones. I want to show you what this high tenant sort of policy looks like, the high security. As you can see, it was set by the service principal right here. And what that looks like is extremely restrictive. There are 23 connectors here that are enabled. These are only for personal collaboration. So the things that are inside of M365 today, so things like SharePoint, Teams, Excel, and things of that nature, we block pretty much everything that we can possibly block, right? Including things like SQL and Power Platform admin connectors. And the other things that we can't block, we put in the non-business group so that they cannot interact with business itself, keeping those things isolated. Now, the reason why we do this is we found that many of our customers commonly do this today for the default environment and many of their environments when they're starting out. I'm going to go into in just a second and show you one other thing that we're working on as to the non sort of greenfield scenario, if you will, because one of the common bits of feedback that we have received is these landing zones are great, but this looks like this is only for a new tenant. And we heard that, so we've done a little bit of work. With that said, that's absolutely right. So normally having to configure all of these things, and build a policy and name it and do all of this stuff takes quite a while and a bit of understanding for a customer to do that. With landing zones, you could essentially, after it's wired up, as Kristen illustrated, you could essentially deploy prescriptive governance, right, if you simply check off everything. With us, I'm sorry, Geeta, you're about to type something. You could deploy it to your tenant in about 15 minutes or so, provided that you hide everything in place. So that includes naming environments, going out and setting your DLPs, turning off guest access, and aligning everything to what we talk about as Microsoft best practice. Right. And again, as I mentioned, we have heard the feedback of, hey, this is great for a brand new tenant. What about tenants that already exist? So let's say you've gone through the entire process and you now have your landing zones initially set up, but now you want to start building things out at scale. So what we're looking at now is what we're effectively calling the vending machine, if you will, which will allow you to build out environments at scale without having to go through the entire process. So with this, you can scale out n number of environments based upon the templates that you define here within the platform. And there we go. Questions, comments? Ask me anything.
Comments, I mean, it's impressive work and a lot of work that you guys have put into this. And I also, if you take a step back at the big picture, I think it really points to the fact of how powerful using the Power Platform can be for an organization to help them in their transformation, meaning three most common things that we hear from our clients and that research reports have shown is that organizations have a huge backlog of business requests for application development. They need to improve their development efficiencies so they can take on more projects without having to hire a lot of people. And also they can reduce spend on third-party software where they're only using a sliver of the features because that's what they need. So they can build custom solutions, to meet their needs by using the Power Platform. And the landing zones, the framework that you guys have put in place really speak to the robust governance capabilities that you can take advantage of in an easy manner, which means it's a mature platform to make use of in scale. And I mean, this kind of work would take a heck of a long time for an organization to do if it wasn't, this great kickstart here that you guys have. This is really, really rich. It's deep.
Well, thanks for saying that, Ben. I'll maybe tag on a little bit to what you're mentioning here. One of the questions that we get asked is, well, what about the COE? Does this replace the COE that the CAT team puts out and that Manuela and her team provide? The COE is an absolute fabulous and phenomenal tool, right? Simply love it. And landing zones is not meant to replace the COE. If anything, what landing zones do is it complements and makes things within the COE easier, right? Because now you can come in and sort of feel that, oh, I've aligned my tenant to best practices, and I'm coming into the COE with DLP enabled, my environment strategy laid out, and a number of different things that are often called out within the COE that you'd have to manually go in and set up. In addition to what you said, I'll also add on that we definitely listen to our customers, and we hear that three very common themes. One of them I mentioned, you definitely want more visibility. Another is from the administrative side of things, they want more control. But more importantly, they want all of these things with less effort. So it's almost like the old adage of you can have things good, fast, or cheap. You have to only pick two. Well, unfortunately for us, we can't pick two in the three that I mentioned. We have to ensure that we provide all three to our customers. So there are things on the horizon that are coming. You should see a lot of changes coming on the admin side of the platform over the next few months that will specifically target those three areas of more visibility, more control, and less effort for the admins, which should then trickle over to the consumer of that platform, meaning the developers, the makers, which makes innovation and digital transformation within organizations much easier.
Participating in user group sessions like this one today is very helpful because the fire hose of information that Microsoft puts out there, it's definitely, hard for people to keep up with. So this is really valuable, and we really appreciate your time coming and sharing with us today. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, I'm trying to do more of these. In fact, I see Andrew has his hand up. Andrew, I'm going to shamelessly plug your user group that we're about to do hopefully next month. Trying to have more communication out to the community and more interactions. Right, that's one of my roles that I really wanted to fill. Before I let Andrew speak, one thing I forgot to mention is that I was also a customer, right? So I guess, Geeta, I don't know if I can say former power addict or once I'm still always a power addict, right? But I absolutely love and adore the platform, but I come at things from a little bit of a different angle. I look at things maybe from a customer-centric side of things first and try to help the customer as much as possible. So I tend to give myself and our other PMs a little bit of a hard time at times, like, we can't do that. Go ahead, Andrew.
Thanks, Ken. Also, so we're not looking to compete with anybody in the user group. It's the user group is really going to be just about admin for the Power Platform. That's kind of why I was saying that up, because it seemed to be an area that we just don't really talk about a lot. And so thanks for that, Ken. I was curious about when we're talking about the landing zones there and spinning those up. Is there the ability to hit that as an API? I'm thinking about automating it, and I'm thinking back to, like you said, like the integration with the COE, and when we have requests for a new environment, could we somehow take advantage of this with that, so you have the best of both worlds?
That's a great question. My answer to that is the GitHub repository that I linked within the chat here contains most of, and if not all of it, the source code information that we put within landing zones itself, which includes how to access the BAP API, which is what is the engine, if you will, behind all of the automation and everything that we're doing within landing zones. So if I were to dissect things, all you would see, if for those of you who may or may not be familiar with this, is that we're using ARM templates and a little bit of JSON and some other things to connect into the BAP API, which then does the automation that you have saw within the demo that my friend Kristen presented there, right? And that's what builds out the landing zones. Everything that you saw right today is completely in product and doable by yourself. It's just that we kickstarted it for you and allowed you to do it.
That's cool. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that was a very similar question, and I think you answered that. Andrew had the same question. It did look like it was an ARM template, so especially if you have like any onboarding processes in the organization for creating new environments, it seems it would fit in pretty well with automating that piece where you could have a gating mechanism where the request comes in, and if it's approved, it kicks off that template. But it sounds like there might be different pieces to it. It might just be us going into the GitHub repo, looking at the source code and seeing which components really make sense from an API standpoint for us to kick off.
Exactly. And, maybe tagging onto the API question, one of the things that we've asked about, I alluded to the fact that we have new features and capabilities that are going to be coming to the platform. One of the important things that our customers have said to us is that this is great. I'm glad that you're building out the product and adding more things. However, we have already built processes and we have automations, because some of our customers are really far along and mature in their journey, and they have discovered these APIs. Right? So what they have asked for us to do is, of course, for everything new that we're putting out, to be a corresponding API for that they can access. No promises on that, but I will say that we have internally talked about doing our best to ensure that our customers can access those APIs so that we do not disrupt any type of business processes, or that they can simply build their own processes on top of the APIs that we will have.
Another question that kind of popped into my head, Ken, as you were just going through everything, and you just mentioned, you have customers that are very advanced and far along in their journey. Do you guys have a maturity model where it kind of specifies, all right, beginning companies, here's typical things that you'll encounter and how you could use this, all the way up to like a level 5 advanced organization, where people could use that as kind of a roadmap of where they're at and how they could advance, stage by stage?
We do, as a matter of fact. I'm about to, give me a second. I'm about to pull that up for you right now. Come on, here we go. If you visit this site, I will put it in the chat in just a second. Give me 2 secs here. Thank you for that. So if you visit that URL that I just put up, right, it will take you to this site that you see here. There's a number of different very valuable resources inside of here. From the adoption workbook itself, which will download a PowerPoint template and allow you to fill it out and guide you along your adoption journey. It starts from basic to almost, full on advanced, if you will. I can open that in a second and sort of just quickly show it to you. In addition to that, we also have, as you asked for, right, here's the maturity model itself, right? And you can learn more about the maturity model by clicking into that. And it will talk about the repeatable practices and so on and so forth, right? So if you look here, hopefully you can still see my screen. I hope the PowerPoint's
Yes,
still...
you got the PowerPoint up right now.
Okay, great. As I mentioned, here is the workbook, right? And as it outlines here, it goes from envisioning to doing things out at scale. This was built out with our help from our customers, the CAD team. A lot of folks actually worked on this. And the team has done a fabulous job of getting this out to customers. And it'll step you through the journey, right? I mean, all of these things, from calling out an executive sponsor to meeting with your team to you name it. We also have some interesting resources that are not on here, but I do have one that I have been sharing with customers, which may be a little useful. So if you give me a second, I will show you something that will probably help you. So from an operational standpoint, one of the things that we often get asked is, well, who does what? I don't understand all the roles. What is needed to run Power Platform? Right? That's a very frequent question that we get asked. So with that in mind, what we have also is something that looks like this. And if you all have ever seen or heard of RACI models, this is our Power Platform governance RACI model. It is really big and really elaborate within there. So it steps an admin through everything from how to create environments on down to securing Dataverse, looking at support, data gateways, data integration, all of those different things. And you can see that within here, we also have supporting links out to all of the documentation that's associated with all of these different roles and tasks. Right? And we looked at this from different angles in terms of like maybe a centralized IT model, maybe you're at scale, so you need a distributed, maybe it's a hybrid model. I mean, it's all of these different things within the organization, right? So you sort of play around with it, see what best suits you, if you will, right? Mm-hmm. And that may or may not fit, but it would at least give you a very good example of how to get started from an operations standpoint in administering Power Platform. This is a very, in my opinion, very key thing that needs to be done within organizations for them to be successful, right? If you're trying to manage this at extreme scales, right? Or even
well, the maturity model too, right? It's the very starting point, because that's how it's going to start. You need environments at the very basic level created using the right architecture, using the right strategy, and then you build upon it, and that's when the center of excellence comes into play, and then eventually you enable growth within the organization. So I think I totally see like how this fits into that whole maturing roadmap that organizations can have. This is really awesome. I think I've never seen. I don't think this is not public information, like you said. This lives in your OneDrive, and it's pretty extensive. So I think that you can tell like there's a lot of work that's gone into it based on all the customer feedback that you've had and all the engagements that you've had and experiences hearing from other organizations in the space. So I think this would be very helpful to take a.
You're spot on there, Geeta. In my former life as an admin, and of operations of M365 and running a team and whatnot, this was an essential part of, again, on the operations side, understanding who needed to do what and who owned what, right? So the organization that I belonged to previously before Microsoft, our tenant was large. At one point in time, it was 140,000 users. Apps wise, from a Power App side, just Power Apps, there was about 20,000 Power Apps running, right, within the organization. The team started out at only 4 people that ran M365 and Power Platform, and then we grew that team to 14. So it was again very important to understand who needed to do what and what other parties needed to be involved, which is why in the landing zones we call out that not only should you be looking at Power Platform, but you should also be looking at things like identity management, security. You should be looking at VNet connectivity. You should be looking at all of these different things and forming V teams, virtual teams, if you will, with these other pillars within your organization, not just within IT, but also within the business itself, and establishing those relationships so that you understand how to meet the needs of the business where they are and what they need. It's, again, very important for IT organizations to do that and cross over the boundaries.
It just feels like it's a vast ocean, right? It's just what we learned, watched and learned from you is kind of just like a drop in that ocean. There's just so much more. I think we just looked at like 2 of those criteria, those design criterias and dimensions on that whole framework. I'm sure there's so much more to learn, and hopefully we can find some time for you to be back at the user group, and we can learn more about, dig into each of those individual criteria as well.
I'm happy to come back anytime, Geeta. I can talk about this stuff for hours.
I did have like a very specific use case question, though. I'm sure you've gotten it from customers, just around service accounts and MFA, being enabled on service accounts. That's something that's a common scenario that we're seeing with majority of our clients, even though the recommendation is don't enable it on service accounts, especially with Power Platform, because connections break. It's a pain for the admin to go back in and make those changes. There might be some little hacks here and there that you could do to proactively, as soon as that token expires, to go do that. Are there any improvements in the area, or is the recommendation still not to enable MFA for service accounts? Because I think it's always it's a struggle with IT and the security teams, right? They want MFA enabled on all the accounts. They treat each account as an entity which needs to be secured, because every account has access to all of these business data, sensitive data.
That is a great question, and it is absolutely a pain point. While I cannot give you the exact specifics, what I can tell you is that you should see some improvements, specifically within about, don't hold me to these dates, please, Geeta. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
You should see some improvements, specifically around June-ish, late July, not June, early August, right? And there will be very specific announcements around this, hopefully within October.
No, that would be awesome. I know Dimitri's on mute, but I'm pretty sure he has a big smile on his face. He's
Definitely.
I'll expand on that just a bit. I mean, one of the things that we've been asked to invest in from customers is exactly that topic, along with 2 other areas: managed identities and service principles.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, I think the service principle route would be a good fix for majority of these issues.
Exactly.
You don't have to go with 80 accounts. We could just go with service principles. Yeah, that would be amazing. Would solve a lot of the problems and ensure that business continuity happens smoothly, especially with MFA.
If you want like quicker news, then maybe not if you show up at the Power Platform Conference in September in Orlando. We might be saying some things. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, well, I hope so. I hope to make it. We'll see. Yeah, I really appreciate your time, Ken. This was super insightful, very
Yeah.
helpful. This is awesome information. And I know it was just 2 of those cells and on that PowerPoint that you talked about, and I can imagine all of the golden nuggets that we're going to learn from the rest of the dimensions on those in that framework as well. But we really appreciate you taking the time to join us and share with the group here today, and being open to the opportunity as well. So we really appreciate that. And for the rest of our user group attendees, we really appreciate you and taking the time on a weekday evening to join us. We look forward to collaborating more, sharing more, and learning more from each other. I have the QR code up there. So feel free to scan that, join the user group, or follow the Twitter account. That's your way to stay up to date on upcoming events and announcements. We look forward to continuing to see you all pretty soon.